She ran into the exclusive nightclub, terrified and clutching a photo of a wedding dress that had been laid on her bed just an hour before. Her stalker was closing in. She walked straight past security to the most dangerous man in the city and begged for sanctuary until dawn. What he did next shocked everyone. The Vampire King looked at the photo, shattered his desk, and delivered a promise that started a war. "You'll stay longer than dawn." He made a mistake coming near what's mine. Zoe grabbed her go bag, packed 3 weeks ago when the first dead Robin appeared on her fire escape, and bolted. She didn't take the elevator. She took the stairs, counting the flights, her breath hitching in her chest like a broken cog. 6 months. 6 months of the feeling of eyes on her neck, of whisper-quiet phone calls where only classical music played, of gifts that escalated from chocolates to locks of her own haircut while she slept. The police had filed reports, but reports were just paper, and paper couldn't stop a man who moved like smoke and picked locks without scratching the metal. She burst out onto the street, the midnight rain instantly soaking her oversized hoodie. She didn't run to the police station. She didn't run to a friend's house, knowing she would only put them in the crosshairs. She ran toward the meatpacking district, toward the heavy, thumping bass of Crimson. It was an exclusive club, a fortress of blackstone and velvet ropes, known for 2 things: an impossible entry list and a security team that didn't answer to the NYPD. But Zoe remembered one specific detail from the police file she'd begged to see a month ago. Her stalker had been banned there. He had touched a waitress, and the management had thrown him out with such force it had broken his collarbone. If Crimson was the one place he feared, it was the only place she could breathe. The bouncer was a mountain of a man, his skin the color of deep mahogany, wearing an earpiece that looked like a toy against his skull. He didn't look at the line of shivering hopefuls in miniskirts. He looked at the street, scanning for threats. When Zoe crashed into the velvet rope, gasping for air, he didn't shove her back. He looked at her eyes, wide, dilated, feral with terror. "Please," Zoe choked out, the rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. "He's coming. He's coming tonight." The bouncer frowned, a tectonic shift of muscle. "We're at capacity, miss." "The man who was banned," she said, her voice rising, bordering on hysteria. "The one in the gray coat. The one you broke. He's after me." The bouncer went still. The casual indifference evaporated, replaced by a sharp, lethal focus. He tapped his earpiece. "Code black at the perimeter. We have a civilian invoking the sanctuary protocol." Unknowingly, he looked back at her. "Name?" "Zoe. Zoe Vance." "Let her in." The rope unhooked. Zoe stumbled past the angry shouts of the people in line, through the heavy oak doors, and the world shifted. The noise of the city died instantly, replaced by the low, seductive thrum of cello music overlaid with a heavy synth beat. The air inside didn't smell like stale beer and sweat. It smelled of amber, ozone, and something metallic, like copper pennies. The lighting was low, bathed in deep reds and violets. Beautiful people moved in slow motion, their laughter sounding like wind chimes. Zoe hugged her wet bag to her chest, dripping water onto the pristine marble floor. She felt painfully out of place, a ragged survivor stumbling into a court of gods. "Follow me." A woman in a silk slip dress appeared at her elbow. Her movements were fluid, too graceful to be entirely natural. "Mr. Draven wishes to assess the threat personally." Mr. Draven. The owner. The king of the East Coast, though Zoe only knew him as the man whose name appeared on the deed of the building. Zoe followed, her sneakers squeaking on the floor, up a spiraling wrought iron staircase that seemed to float in the center of the room. They ascended past the VIP balcony, past the private booths, up to a heavy steel door at the very top of the club. The woman opened the door and gestured for Zoe to enter, then closed it softly behind her, leaving Zoe alone in the silence. The office was cavernous, walled entirely by glass on one side overlooking the rain-slicked city. A fireplace crackled on the opposite wall, though it gave off no smoke. In the center of the room, behind a desk carved from a single slab of obsidian, sat a man who looked like he had been carved from the same stone. Nikolai Draven was stillness personified. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders with architectural precision. His hair was black, swept back from a face that was too sharp, too symmetrical to be kind. But it was his eyes that stopped Zoe's heart. They were the color of aged whiskey held up to the light, amber, flecked with gold, and utterly ancient. He was looking at a tablet, his finger hovering over the glass, but when Zoe took a step, his head snapped up. For a moment, the room seemed to lose all oxygen. Nikolai rose from his chair, a movement so smooth it blurred the air. His eyes widened, the pupils blowing wide until the amber was nearly swallowed by black. His hand gripped the edge of the obsidian desk, and Zoe heard the distinct sound of stone cracking. "Elara," he whispered, the name carrying a weight of grief that hit Zoe like a physical blow. Zoe stepped back, her hand finding the doorknob. "No. My name is Zoe. I came because of the Stalker. The police said he was banned here." Nikolai blinked, and the mask slammed back down. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, imperious mask. He looked at his hand, tracing the crack he had just made in the stone, then looked back at her. The intensity was still there, burning beneath the surface, but it was controlled now. Restrained. "The Stalker," Nikolai repeated, his voice a low baritone that seemed to vibrate in Zoe's chest. "You are the one he was harassing. The human." "He's going to take me tonight," Zoe said, the words spilling out in a rush. She fumbled with her bag, pulling out the photo she had taken of the bed before she ran. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped her phone. She walked forward and placed it on the desk, keeping the furniture between them. "I found this an hour ago. A wedding dress. He says it's for tomorrow." Nikolai looked down at the phone. He didn't touch it. He stared at the image of the vintage lace dress, and his expression went from neutral to something terrified people rarely saw, the calm before a massacre. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The fire in the hearth flared blue. "That dress," Nikolai said softly. "It is Victorian. 1872 pattern. Silk and Chantilly lace." "How do you know that?" Zoe whispered. Nikolai slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. "Because I bought it. A very long time ago." Zoe felt the room spin. "You? Are you working with him?" "No," Nikolai said, the word cracking like a whip. He moved around the desk, and Zoe flinched, bracing for violence. Nikolai stopped instantly, raising his hands. They were pale, elegant hands, but she could see the tension in the tendons. "I am not working with him, Zoe. But I know who he is. And if he has that dress, then you are in far more danger than you realize." "He's just a crazy guy," Zoe argued, though her voice wavered. "He's obsessed." "He is not a guy," Nikolai corrected. He took another step, slow and deliberate, closing the distance until he was a few feet away. He smelled of rain and old books and power. And he is not just obsessed. He is hunting a memory. Nikolai reached out, his hand hovering near her wet shoulder but not making contact. It was as if he wanted to touch her to confirm she was real, but was terrified she might shatter. "You have her eyes," he murmured, almost to himself. "The same defiant jaw. The same pulse." "Whose?" Zoe demanded, fear giving way to confusion. "Someone I failed to protect," Nikolai said. He turned away, walking to the massive window. He looked out at the city, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "You asked for sanctuary. You have it. No one enters this room without my permission. No one touches you. You will stay here. Until dawn," Zoe said, repeating her plan. "Just until I can get a bus out of the city." Nikolai laughed, a dark, humorless sound. "You think a bus will stop him? You think distance matters to a creature who can track the beat of your heart from 3 blocks away?" He turned back to her, his silhouette framed by the lightning flashing outside. "You will stay longer than dawn, Zoe. You will stay until I have hunted him down and turned him into ash." He made a mistake coming near what is mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time in 6 months, Zoe felt a strange, impossible sensation: safety. "Who is he?" Zoe asked. "His name is Julian," Nikolai said. "And he is my son." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Zoe stared at him. He didn't look old enough to have a grown son, let alone one who was stalking women with antique dresses. But there was something in Nikolai's eyes, a depth of time that didn't fit a 30-year-old face, that made her pause. Your son. Not by blood, Nikolai clarified, his jaw tightening. By adoption. Of a sort. I made him what he is. And I am responsible for the monster he has become. He walked over to a small side table and poured a glass of amber liquid, then a glass of water. He brought the water to her. Drink. You're in shock. Zoe took the glass. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was cool, shockingly so, like marble that had been left in the shade. The contact sent a jolt through her arm, not static electricity, but something deeper, like a hum of energy. Nikolai pulled his hand back as if burned. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to a plush velvet sofa near the fire. I need to make a call. Then I will explain everything. Zoe sat. Her legs gave out before she hit the cushions. She watched as Nikolai pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket. He didn't dial, he just spoke into it. Silas. The penthouse. Now. Bring the iron restraints. And bring the archives from the 1870s. He paused, listening. Yes. It's him. And Silas? He found her. Zoe took a sip of water. It was cool and clean. She watched the man who called himself a king pace the length of the room. He moved like a panther in a cage, lethal, restless, and beautiful. She knew she should be running. Every survival instinct she had honed over the last 6 months screamed that this man was dangerous. But out there, in the rain, was a man with a wedding dress and a deadline. In here, there was warm fire, thick glass, and a monster who seemed determined to stand between her and the dark. She decided, in that moment, to trust the monster she didn't know over the one she did. An hour later, the door opened again. A man entered, older than Nikolai in appearance, with silver hair and a face lined with weary wisdom. This was Silas. He carried a leather satchel and a long, narrow case that looked like it held a musical instrument or a rifle. Silas stopped when he saw Zoe. His eyes widened, darting from her to Nikolai and back. By the blood, he whispered. The resemblance is uncanny. It is a curse, Nikolai said from the window. He hadn't moved for 40 minutes. Julian believes she is the reincarnation. He believes if he completes the ritual he started in 1872, he can bring Alara back. The ritual required a wedding, Silas said, his voice grave. And a sacrifice. He sent her the dress, Nikolai said, turning around. His face was a mask of grim determination. Marked tomorrow. Silas paled. The blood moon is tomorrow night. If he intends to finish it. He needs her blood, Nikolai finished. And he needs her willing submission, or at least her presence at the altar. Zoe set her glass down with a sharp clink. I'm right here, she said, her voice stronger now. Stop talking about me like I'm a ghost. I'm not Alara. I'm Zoe. And I'm not going to be anyone's sacrifice. Nikolai looked at her, and for a fleeting second, a corner of his mouth ticked upward. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. No, he agreed softly. You have fire. Alara was gentle. You're a storm. He walked over to the coffee table and opened the leather satchel Silas had brought. He pulled out an old, leather-bound journal and a yellowed photograph. He slid the photo across the table to Zoe. Zoe leaned forward. The photo was sepia-toned, cracked at the corners. It showed a woman standing in a garden, wearing the exact dress that was currently lying on Zoe's bed. The woman was smiling, holding a parasol. And the face. It was Zoe's face. The same curve of the nose, the same wide-set eyes, the same small scar above the left eyebrow, a scar Zoe had gotten falling off a bike when she was 7. How? Zoe whispered. That's impossible. The universe echoes, Nikolai said. Sometimes it repeats a melody it liked. He pointed to the man standing next to the woman in the photo. He was blurry, his face turned away, but the stance was familiar. That was Julian. He loved her. But she chose me. And that, Nikolai pointed to a shadow in the background of the photo, a figure barely visible in the trees, is why he killed her. Zoe recoiled. He killed her. He didn't mean to, Silas interjected softly. He tried to turn her. To make her like us. Without permission. Her body couldn't handle the strain. She died in Nikolai's arms on their wedding day. Turn her? Zoe asked. Like, into a vampire? She said the word tentatively, waiting for them to laugh. They didn't. Nikolai simply stared at her, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Yes, Nikolai said. We are vampires, Zoe. I am 412 years old. Julian is 170. And you are in the middle of a blood feud that has spanned a century. Zoe stood up. It was too much. Stalkers, she could handle. Ancient feuds, maybe. Vampires? That was insanity. She backed away. I need to go. You're crazy. Both of you. Are we? Nikolai moved. He didn't walk, he blurred. 1 second he was by the table, the next he was standing between her and the door. He didn't touch her, but the air around him crackled. He opened his mouth slightly, and his canines lengthened, descending into sharp, lethal points. Zoe froze. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also undeniably real. The way the light caught the enamel, the way his eyes shifted from amber to crimson. If you leave, Nikolai said, his voice rough with the effort of holding back his nature, Julian will find you. He is stronger than me in some ways. He has fed on madness for a century. He will take you, he will drain you, and he will try to put a dead woman's soul into your empty vessel. Do you want that? Zoe shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. No. Then stay. Nikolai retracted his fangs, his face softening. I swear to you, by the old laws and by the memory of the woman I loved, nothing will harm you here. I will tear this city apart to find him, but until I do, you are under my protection. Zoe looked at him. Really looked at him. Beneath the monster, beneath the ancient power, she saw a man who was profoundly, aching lonely. A man who had looked at a photo of a dead woman every day for 100 years. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Nikolai let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since 1872. Good. Silas, prepare the guest suite. The one with the UV-filtered glass. And double the guard on the roof. Done, Silas said, bowing slightly before exiting. Nikolai turned back to Zoe. You should sleep. The suite is secure. There are locks on the inside that even I cannot open without breaking the door down. I don't have any clothes, Zoe murmured, looking down at her wet hoodie. Nikolai hesitated, then walked to a closet hidden in the wall paneling. He pulled out a crisp white dress shirt, made of silk so fine it looked like water. Wear this. It will be large, but dry. He handed it to her. Again, the care not to touch her. Thank you, Zoe said. She took the shirt. Nikolai. He paused, his hand on the doorknob of the adjoining room. Yes. Why did you help me? Before you knew who I looked like. Nikolai turned, his expression shadowed. Because you ran to the darkness to hide from the dark. That takes a kind of courage I haven't seen in a long time. Zoe didn't think she would sleep, but the bed in the guest suite was like a cloud, and the exhaustion of adrenaline withdrawal was a heavy blanket. She locked the door, 3 deadbolts and a keypad, and curled up in Nikolai's shirt. It smelled of him. Sandalwood, rain, and that strange metallic copper scent. She dreamed of a ballroom. She was wearing the dress. A man was spinning her, his hand warm on her waist. She felt love, overwhelming and bright. She looked up to see his face, expecting Nikolai, but the face shifted. It melted, the skin sloughing off to reveal a skull, and a voice hissed, tomorrow. Zoe woke with a gasp. Sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She flinched, expecting to be burned, then remembered the UV filters. She scrambled out of bed, her heart hammering. The door to the main office was open. She walked out barefoot. The room was transformed by daylight. It looked like a modern, high-end executive suite, not a vampire's lair. Nikolai was there, standing by the desk. He was on the phone again, his back to her. He wasn't wearing his jacket, just a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like marble cords. I don't care about the council's jurisdiction, he was snarling into the phone. He breached the pact. He is in my territory. I am invoking the blood hunt. He slammed the phone down, cracking the screen. Bad news? Zoe asked, her voice raspy. Nikolai turned. In the daylight, he looked less like a monster and more like a weary angel. The shadows under his eyes were prominent. The council is useless. They want a trial. I want a head. He looked her over, his gaze lingering on the oversized shirt for a fraction of a second before snapping up to her eyes. Did you sleep? A little. Nightmares. I heard, Nikolai said. You talk in your sleep. You asked for the music to stop. Zoe wrapped her arms around herself. It was the music box. He sent me one. It played the Danube Waltz. Nikolai went still. The Blue Danube. It was the song playing when I proposed. He walked over to her, his movements agitated. He is taunting me. Every gift he gave you was a piece of our history. He is rewriting the past with you as the ink. Suddenly, the elevator at the far end of the room chimed. Nikolai spun around, placing himself instantly in front of Zoe. Silas, he called out. The doors slid open. It wasn't Silas. A delivery boy, looking terrified and pale, stood there holding a massive bouquet of black roses. He was trembling. Delivery for Ms. Vance. Don't move, Nikolai commanded. He didn't speak to the boy, he spoke to the air. Silas, how did a human get past the perimeter? Silas's voice came over the intercom, breathless. The system was hacked, sir. Biometrics were looped. I'm locking down the elevators now. Nikolai walked toward the boy. The boy flinched. Leave it and go. Run. The boy dropped the flowers and scrambled back into the elevator, hammering the button. The doors closed. Nikolai stared at the flowers. Black roses. Dozens of them. Don't touch them, Zoe said, stepping out from behind him. The thorns. He poisons them. Nikolai looked back at her, impressed. You learned. I had to. Nikolai waved his hand, and a gust of wind, generated from nowhere, swept the flowers off the floor and into the fireplace. The flames roared up, consuming them instantly. But as the petals burned, something fell out of the bouquet and clattered onto the stone hearth. It was a small, silver locket. Nikolai knelt and picked it up. He didn't need to open it to know what was inside, but he did anyway. He held it up. Inside was a lock of hair. Golden blonde. That's my hair, Zoe said, her hand going to her throat. From when I was a kid. My mom kept it in a box in her attic in Ohio. He has been watching you for longer than 6 months, Nikolai said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. And he has been to your childhood home. He closed his fist around the locket, the silver crumpling like paper. He isn't just watching, Zoe. He is hunting. And he just proved he can reach you, even here. Nikolai turned to her. The penthouse isn't safe anymore. We need to move. Tonight. Move where? There is a safe house. Upstate. Sacred ground where the vampires of his lineage cannot tread without burning. Nikolai grabbed his jacket. Pack your bag. We leave in 10 minutes. Wait, Zoe said. She walked up to him, reaching out to grab his arm. She stopped just short of touching him. You said he's your progeny. That you made him. Yes. Does that mean you can't kill him? Is there some rule? Nikolai looked at her hand, then at her face. The conflict in his eyes was a storm of amber and gold. There is no rule. But killing your own creation, it tears a piece of your soul away. It is the ultimate taboo. But will you do it? Zoe asked. If it comes down to him or me? Nikolai didn't hesitate this time. He closed the distance, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her skin, cold and electric. Zoe gasped at the contact, but she didn't pull away. I have already lost this face once, Nikolai said, his voice rough with emotion. I will burn the world before I lose it again. Yes, Zoe. I will kill him. He pulled away, the moment of intimacy snapping like a taut wire. Get your bag. The sun sets in 4 hours. When darkness falls, the hunt begins. The car was not a car, it was a tank disguised as a sleek, matte black sedan. The glass was 3 inches thick, the doors reinforced with steel plating, and the engine purred with a low, menacing growl that vibrated through the leather seats. Nikolai drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes scanning the road with a predator's intensity, while the city skyline shrank in the rearview mirror, dissolving into the rainy mist. Zoe sat in the passenger seat, her knees pulled to her chest. She was still wearing Nikolai's oversized shirt, now tucked into a pair of leggings Silas had miraculously produced from a go-bag he kept for emergencies. The silence in the car was thick, heavy with the things they weren't saying. "You're angry," Zoe whispered, watching the streetlights flick by like tracer fire. "I am furious," Nikolai corrected, his voice devoid of inflection. "There is a leak in my organization." Julian could not have bypassed the biometric scanners without an insider key. "Someone close to me has betrayed us." "Silas?" Zoe asked, the name feeling heavy on her tongue. "No," Nikolai said immediately. "Silas has been with me since the Crimean War. He is iron. It is someone else. A guard. A secretary. Someone invisible." His grip on the steering wheel tightened, the leather creaking. "I will find them. And when I do, I will make them wish they had never heard the name Draven." Zoe looked at him, the sharp profile, the immortal stillness. "You talk about violence like it's a language you're tired of speaking." Nikolai glanced at her, surprised. The amber in his eyes softened slightly. "It is the only language my kind respects. But yes, I am tired of it. I spent 2 centuries building an empire of peace, of order. Julian is chaos." "Why did you turn him?" Zoe asked. It was the question that had been burning in her throat since the office. "If he's so dangerous." The car turned onto a private highway, the trees on either side pressing in like dark sentinels. Nikolai was silent for a long time. "Because he was dying," Nikolai said finally. "And I was weak." "He was your friend?" "He was my brother. Not by blood, but by bond. We were soldiers together. He took a bullet meant for me." As he lay bleeding out in the mud, begging for life. "I couldn't let him go. I thought I was saving him." Nikolai's face twisted with ancient regret. "I didn't know that immortality acts like a magnifying glass. It takes what you are and amplifies it 1,000 times. I was disciplined, so I became a king. Julian was passionate, obsessive, and so he became a monster." Zoe looked out the window. "And Alara? Where did she fit in?" "She was the nurse who treated us before the battle," Nikolai said softly. "We both loved her. She chose me. Julian never forgave either of us." The car slowed as they approached a massive iron gate flanked by stone gargoyles. Nikolai pressed a button on the dash, and the gates swung open with a groan of metal. They drove up a winding gravel path, the headlights cutting through the fog to reveal a sprawling stone manor that looked like it had been plucked from a Gothic novel and dropped into the Hudson Valley. "Blackwood Manor," Nikolai announced. "My sanctuary. The soil here is consecrated. Julian cannot step foot on the grounds without his skin blistering. You are safe here." Zoe looked up at the looming towers, the dark windows. It didn't look safe. It looked like a tomb. The interior of Blackwood Manor was a museum of shadows. The furniture was draped in white sheets, ghostly shapes in the gloom. Nikolai moved through the hall, pulling the sheets off with efficient snaps of his wrist, revealing velvet armchairs, antique tables, and grand oil paintings. "There is no staff here," Nikolai said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "I keep this place empty. For solitude." "It's lonely," Zoe said, hugging herself against the chill. "It is peaceful," Nikolai countered. He walked over to a massive fireplace and, with a wave of his hand, ignited the logs. The sudden warmth was a physical relief. "I will secure the perimeter. The kitchen is fully stocked. Silas sends a delivery service weekly, just in case. Eat. Rest." "I can't rest," Zoe said. She walked toward the grand staircase, drawn to a large portrait hanging on the landing. It was covered by a heavy velvet curtain. "Is this her?" Nikolai stopped. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her. "Zoe, I need to see," she said, her hand hovering over the fabric. "I need to know what I'm up against. What he sees when he looks at me." "Go ahead," Nikolai said, his voice barely a whisper. Zoe gripped the velvet and pulled. The heavy fabric slid to the floor with a soft thud. The woman in the painting was breathtaking. She wore the white lace wedding dress, the same one on Zoe's bed. Her hair was piled high in intricate curls, her lips painted a soft rose. But it was the eyes that made Zoe gasp. They were her eyes. Not just the color, but the expression, a mix of defiance and kindness. It wasn't like looking at a relative, it was like looking in a mirror that reflected a ghost. She was 23, Nikolai said, appearing beside her. He moved so silently she didn't even flinch anymore. The same age you are now. She looks happy, Zoe whispered. She was. Until the end. Nikolai reached out, his fingers tracing the air inches from the painted face. Do you know what the worst part is? I have spent a century trying to forget the sound of her voice. And now, every time you speak, I hear her. Zoe turned to him. They were close, standing on the narrow landing. She could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the faint tension lines around his mouth. Is that why you can't look at me? She asked. Because it hurts? Yes, Nikolai admitted. And because I am terrified that if I look too long, I will start to see you instead of her. And I cannot afford to care for another mortal. The cost is too high. I'm not asking you to care, Zoe said, a flash of irritation cutting through her fear. I'm asking you to keep me alive. And I will, Nikolai vowed. Come. We have work to do. Work. Julian will not stop at the perimeter. He will find a way to break the wards, or he will wait for you to leave. If we are to survive tomorrow night, you cannot be a victim. You must be a weapon. The training room was in the basement, a stone-walled chamber filled with racks of medieval weaponry that looked disturbingly well-maintained. Swords, daggers, crossbows, and strange, curved blades that shimmered with a bluish metal. Nikolai stripped off his suit jacket and rolled his sleeves up further. Vampires are fast, he said, pacing the room. Faster than your eye can track. If you try to run, you die. If you try to fight with strength, you die. Great pep talk, Zoe muttered, eyeing a rack of spears. Reality is not a pep talk. Nikolai picked up a small, double-edged dagger. The metal was dark, almost black. This is made of cold iron and dipped in silver nitrate. It is one of the few things that can slow us down. It won't kill an elder like Julian, but it will hurt enough to buy you seconds. And seconds are all you get. He tossed the dagger to her. Zoe caught it, fumbling slightly. It was heavier than it looked. Attack me, Nikolai ordered. What? Try to stab me. Anywhere. I'm not going to stab you. Zoe, Nikolai's voice dropped, becoming a command. If you cannot strike me, you cannot strike him. And he will not hesitate. Attack me. Zoe gritted her teeth. Fine. She lunged, aiming for his shoulder. She blinked, and suddenly she was facing the opposite wall, the dagger still in her hand, Nikolai standing behind her. Too slow, he whispered in her ear. You telegraphed the move with your eyes. Never look where you intend to strike. She spun around, slashing horizontally. Nikolai caught her wrist midair. His grip was like a steel trap, unyielding. He didn't hurt her, but he immobilized her completely. Better, he said. But you're fighting like a human. You expect me to have bones that break, muscles that tire. I don't. He stepped closer, forcing her arm down. You have to be unpredictable. Dirty. He released her. Zoe rubbed her wrist, frustration boiling over. I'm a graphic designer, Nikolai. Not a ninja. I can't beat a vampire. You don't have to beat him, Nikolai said intense. You just have to surprise him. He moved again, faster this time, coming at her with a training stick. Zoe dodged, instinct taking over. She ducked under his swing, scrambled back, and threw a handful of sawdust from the floor into his face. Nikolai paused, blinking. He brushed the dust from his eyes and smiled. A genuine, dangerous smile. Good, he said. Very good. He came at her again. For the next hour, he drove her to exhaustion. He taught her how to find the gap in the armor, how to use her smaller size to slip out of a hold, how to aim for the neck and the heart. By the time he called a halt, Zoe was drenched in sweat, her muscles screaming. She leaned against the stone wall, gasping for air. Nikolai looked barely winded, but his eyes were bright, alive. He handed her a towel. You learn quickly. Alara never liked the blade. She preferred words. I prefer words too, Zoe panted. But words didn't stop Julian from putting a wedding dress on my bed. Nikolai's expression darkened. He stepped closer, taking the dagger from her hand. As he did, his fingers brushed hers. Flash. The vision hit Zoe like a physical slap. Candlelight. A heavy scent of lilies. Pain, sharp and tearing in her neck. A man's face, not Nikolai's, hovering above her, his mouth smeared with crimson. "Don't leave me," the man sobbed. "Drink, my love. Drink and stay." The taste of copper in her mouth. The feeling of her heart stuttering, slowing, stopping. Zoe gasped and collapsed. Nikolai caught her before she hit the floor, sweeping her up into his arms. "Zoe." His voice was frantic. "Zoe, look at me." Zoe blinked, the vision fading, leaving a throbbing headache behind her eyes. She was in Nikolai's arms, pressed against his chest. She could feel that he had no heartbeat, just a solid, cool stillness. "I saw him," she whispered, clutching his shirt. "I saw Julian." When he killed her." Nikolai went rigid. "You saw a memory?" "I tasted the blood," Zoe choked out. He tried to feed her his blood. To turn her. Nikolai closed his eyes, pain radiating off him in waves. "Yes. That is the forbidden rite. To force the change on a dying soul creates an abomination. It is why she died." He opened his eyes, and they were terrifying. "You are connecting to the residual energy. The ritual he is performing, it is thinning the veil between you and her. He is trying to overwrite your mind with hers. How do I stop it?" "We break the connection," Nikolai said fiercely. "We kill the source." A shrill ringing cut through the moment. Nikolai's secure phone, lying on a bench, was vibrating. He set Zoe down gently on a bench, making sure she was steady before walking over to answer it. "Report." He listened for a moment, his face draining of what little color it had. "Are you certain?" A pause. "Send the file." "Now." Nikolai hung up. He looked at Zoe, and the look on his face was one of pure devastation. "What?" Zoe asked, standing up on shaky legs. "Is it Julian?" "It is the traitor," Nikolai said. Silas traced the unauthorized access to the penthouse security grid. The signal didn't come from a hacker. It came from a hardline connection. "From where?" "From inside the Vampire Council headquarters," Nikolai said. "The High Council isn't just ignoring Julian. They are helping him." Zoe felt the blood drain from her face. "Why?" "You're one of them." "Because I am the king of the East," Nikolai said, his voice low and dangerous. "And they have feared my power for a century. They want me gone. And they know that the only thing that can destroy me is my own creation." He walked over to the weapon rack and pulled down a long, curved sword. The metal sang as it left the sheath. "The game has changed," Nikolai said. "We are not just hunting a stalker anymore. We are at war with the entire hierarchy." "So we're alone," Zoe said, the weight of it settling on her shoulders. "No," Nikolai turned to her, the sword gleaming in the dim light. "We are together." And that is what terrifies them. The sun was high, but the heavy velvet curtains kept the library in a state of perpetual twilight. Nikolai was pacing, a map of the surrounding counties spread out on the massive oak table. Zoe was curled in a chair, a mug of coffee in her hand, watching him. "The ritual requires a nexus point," Nikolai was muttering. "A place where the ley lines cross. There are 3 in this county." "The abandoned church," Zoe said suddenly. Nikolai stopped. "The Chapel of St. Jude? How do you know?" "I didn't know the name," Zoe said, rubbing her temples. "But I saw it. In the dream last night. Broken stained glass. A stone altar with a crack down the middle. And roots. Tree roots growing through the floor." Nikolai nodded grimly. "That is St. Jude's. It was abandoned in the 1920s after a fire. It is secluded, desecrated. Perfect for blood magic. So we go there," Zoe said. "We ambush him." "It is a trap," Nikolai said. "He knows I will figure it out. He knows you will have visions. He is counting on us coming. Do we have a choice?" "No." Nikolai leaned over the map. "But we can choose how we arrive." Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the library burst open. Zoe jumped, spilling hot coffee on her hand. Nikolai was a blur of motion, placing himself between Zoe and the intruder, a dagger appearing in his hand from nowhere. But the figure in the doorway wasn't Julian. It was a small girl, no older than 10, wearing a pristine school uniform and a backpack. She had bright red hair and glasses that were slightly askew. She looked from Nikolai to the dagger, then rolled her eyes. Put that away, Uncle Nick. You'll poke someone's eye out. Zoe stared. Who? Nikolai lowered the dagger, looking completely baffled. Penny? What are you doing here? Dad sent me, the girl said, marching into the room and dropping her backpack on a priceless 17th century rug. He said things are getting apocalyptic and that you needed the Oracle. Since the Oracle is currently in Bali, you get me. Penny is a prodigy, Nikolai explained to a stunned Zoe. Her father is the Warlock of Greenwich. She has talents. Penny walked up to Zoe and squinted. You look like the painting. Except tireder. And your aura is full of static. She reached out and poked Zoe's arm. Yep. Reincarnation tether. Nasty stuff. Sticky. Can you fix it? Zoe asked, looking at the child. Fix it? No. That's soul-grade magic, Penny said, grabbing a cookie from a tray Nikolai had left out. But I can shield you. Make you invisible to his tracking spells for about 3 hours. Long enough to sneak up on him. Nikolai looked at the girl. Your father risked a war with the council to send you here? Dad says the council are a bunch of dusty old bats who forgot that the balance matters, Penny said, munching. Also, he owes you for that time in Miami. Nikolai sighed, a sound of immense relief. Acceptable. He turned to Zoe. This changes the odds. If Julian cannot sense you coming, we have the element of surprise. 3 hours, Zoe repeated. Is that enough? It has to be, Nikolai said. He looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. Sunset is in 4 hours. Penny, begin the shielding. Zoe, go prepare. Tonight, we end this. The ruins stood on a cliff overlooking the Hudson River. The roof was gone, leaving the nave open to the stormy sky. Moonlight filtered through the racing clouds, illuminating the jagged teeth of the broken stone walls. In the center of the ruin, surrounded by a circle of black candles that burned with green flames, stood Julian. He was beautiful in a terrifying way, blonde hair that glowed in the moonlight, a face that mirrored Nikolai's in structure but lacked his restraint. He wore a suit from another era, a velvet frock coat that matched the description in Zoe's police file. On the stone altar, the one with the crack down the middle, lay the wedding dress. It was arranged carefully, as if waiting for a body to fill it. Julian paced the circle, chanting in a language that sounded like grinding stones. The air around him shimmered with heat. Zoe and Nikolai crouched in the shadows of the choir loft, 20 feet above the nave. Penny's spell was working. Julian hadn't looked up. He is drawing power from the earth, Nikolai whispered, his lips barely moving. If he completes the chant, the barrier will fall. He will be able to rip your soul out from a mile away. What's the plan? Zoe whispered back. Her hand was gripping the hilt of the silver dagger so hard her knuckles were white. I will drop down and engage him, Nikolai said. I need to draw his focus. When he attacks me, and he will leave the circle. That is your moment. You must get to the altar and burn the dress. It is the anchor for the ritual. Destroy the vessel, destroy the spell. Burn the dress, Zoe nodded. She had a lighter in her pocket. Got it. Zoe, Nikolai turned to her. In the darkness, his eyes were burning coals. If I fall, do not try to save me. Run. You won't fall, Zoe said fiercely. Promise me. No. Nikolai stared at her, then a grim smile touched his lips. Stubborn. Just like her. He stood up on the ledge. The wind caught his coat, making it billow like wings. Julian. Nikolai's voice boomed like thunder, shaking the stones. Down below, Julian stopped chanting. He looked up slowly. His smile was wide and full of teeth. Father, Julian called back, his voice smooth and mocking. You're late for the wedding. There will be no wedding, Nikolai said. He jumped. He fell 20 feet and landed in a crouch inside the nave, the stone floor cracking beneath his impact. He rose, the curved sword extending from his side. You have broken the laws, Nikolai said, walking toward the circle. You have hunted the innocent. You have conspired with traitors. I have done what you were too cowardly to do. Julian screamed, his composure shattering instantly. I am bringing her back. She belongs to us. She belongs to the grave. Nikolai roared and he lunged. The collision was seismic. Vampire against vampire, creator against creation. They moved faster than Zoe could follow, sparks flying as steel met supernatural resistance. Julian was strong, stronger than Nikolai had feared, fed on the blood of the innocent and powered by the ley lines. He caught Nikolai's sword with his bare hand, ignoring the burning metal, and backhanded Nikolai across the room. Nikolai smashed into a stone pillar, crumbling it. "No!" Zoe hissed to herself. She scrambled down the ruined staircase, keeping to the shadows. Penny's spell held. Julian was focused entirely on the dust cloud where Nikolai had fallen. Zoe reached the floor and sprinted toward the altar. The air around the circle was thick and hot, smelling of ozone and rot. She reached the candles. "Almost there," she gasped. She lunged for the altar, the lighter in her hand flicking to life. But just as the flame touched the lace of the dress, a cold hand clamped around her throat. Zoe was lifted off her feet. She choked, kicking wildly. Julian was holding her, his face inches from hers. His eyes were voids of madness. "Did you think I wouldn't smell you?" Julian hissed. "Magic or not, I know the scent of my own obsession." He threw her onto the altar, pinning her down on top of the wedding dress. The stone was freezing against her back. "Perfect," Julian whispered, pulling a jagged obsidian knife from his coat. "You're exactly where you need to be." Zoe struggled, but his strength was absolute. She looked over his shoulder. Nikolai was rising from the rubble, blood streaming from a wound on his forehead. "Nikolai!" Zoe screamed. Julian raised the knife. "Awaken, Ilara. Return to the flesh." Nikolai didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply vanished. In the space of a heartbeat, he materialized directly behind Julian. He didn't use a sword. He didn't use a dagger. He wrapped his arm around Julian's neck in a chokehold and jerked back with the force of a hydraulic press. There was a sickening crack, but Julian didn't drop. He roared, driving his elbow backward into Nikolai's ribs. Nikolai grunted but didn't let go. "Burn it, Zoe!" Nikolai shouted, struggling to hold the thrashing vampire. "Burn it now!" Zoe scrambled up, grabbing the lighter that had fallen on the dress. Her hands were shaking violently. Julian was clawing at Nikolai's face, tearing furrows in the skin, but Nikolai held on, his eyes locked on Zoe. Zoe flicked the lighter. Flame. She jammed it into the layers of vintage silk. Dry as bone and old as sin, the fabric caught instantly. Fire whooshed up, turning the white dress into a torch. Julian screamed, a sound that wasn't human. It was the sound of a tether snapping. He convulsed in Nikolai's arms, smoke pouring from his mouth. "No!" Julian shrieked. "You killed her again." With a final burst of insane strength, Julian broke Nikolai's grip and spun around. But he didn't attack Nikolai. He looked at the burning dress, then at Zoe. "If I cannot have her," Julian whispered, his skin beginning to crack and peel as the ritual backlash hit him, "no one will." He lunged at Zoe, his claws extended for her heart. Zoe had nowhere to go. She braced herself for the end. But Nikolai was there. He threw himself in front of her, his back to the attacker, shielding her body with his own. Zoe heard the wet, meaty sound of claws sinking into flesh. Nikolai stiffened, a sharp intake of breath hissing through his teeth. He looked down at Zoe, his face inches from hers. "Are you unhurt?" he whispered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Nikolai," Zoe gasped, looking over his shoulder. Julian's claws were buried deep in Nikolai's back. But Julian was freezing up, his body turning gray and brittle. The destruction of the anchor object while the ritual was active was tearing him apart. "Father," Julian wheezed, his eyes fading. "It is cold." Nikolai reached back, gripping Julian's arm, and ripped the claws out of his own body with a sickening squelch. He turned, staggering slightly, and placed a hand on Julian's chest. "Go into the dark, my son," Nikolai said softly. "Sleep." He pushed. Julian's body crumbled. It didn't fall. It simply disintegrated into a pile of gray ash, carried away by the wind swirling through the ruins. Silence fell over the chapel. Nikolai stood swaying for a moment, then collapsed to his knees. "Nikolai." Zoe scrambled to him, catching him as he slumped forward. His back was a ruin of shredded suit and torn flesh. The wounds weren't healing. You're hurt. Why aren't you healing? The claws. Nikolai rasped, his skin pale as moonlight. Poisoned. With dead man's blood. It stops regeneration. What do I do? Zoe cried, pressing her hands against the wounds to staunch the flow. Tell me what to do. Nothing, Nikolai whispered. He reached up, his bloody hand cupping her cheek. He looked at her, and for the first time, he wasn't looking for a ghost. He was looking at her. You're safe. That is enough. His hand slid from her cheek. His eyes rolled back, and the vampire king of the East Coast went still. Zoe didn't know she could scream like that. It was a sound torn from the bottom of her lungs, raw and jagged, echoing off the ruined stone walls of St. Jude's. She pressed her hands over the wounds on Nikolai's back, her fingers slipping in the warm, viscous fluid that pulsed from him. It wasn't just blood, it was darker, smelling of iron and rot. The poison. Silas, she screamed into the phone she had fumbled from Nikolai's pocket, her blood-slicked fingers barely able to unlock the screen. Silas, help us. The voice on the other end was calm, a terrifying contrast to the chaos in the chapel. I have your location. Penny is already en route. She will be there in 30 seconds. Keep pressure on the wounds. Do not let him close his eyes. Zoe dropped the phone and grabbed Nikolai's face. His skin was gray, the veins beneath his eyes standing out in stark, black relief. He looked like a statue that had been left out in the rain for centuries, eroding, fading. Nikolai, she sobbed, slapping his cheek lightly. Open your eyes. You don't get to do this. You don't get to make a speech and die. That's a cliché, and I hate clichés. His lashes fluttered. A sliver of amber showed, dull and clouded. Zoe. I'm here, she said, leaning her forehead against his, sharing her breath with him. Stay with me. You promised to protect me. You can't protect me if you're dead. The air pressure in the chapel dropped suddenly, causing Zoe's ears to pop. A shimmering circle of violet light appeared near the altar, and Penny stepped through, looking less like a schoolgirl and more like a furious deity. She took one look at the scene, the pile of ash that was Julian, the burning dress, and the fallen king, and her face went pale. Dead man's blood, Penny swore, a word that sounded ancient and foul coming from a child's mouth. She dropped to her knees beside them. Move, Zoe. I need to stabilize the core. Zoe scrambled back. Penny placed her small hands over the shredded flesh of Nikolai's back. She didn't touch the wounds. Her hands hovered an inch above, glowing with a fierce, white light. Nikolai arched his back, a guttural groan ripping from his throat. It's burning the poison out, Penny gritted, sweat popping on her forehead. Silas is landing the chopper in the field. We have to move him now. If this reaches his heart, he's gone. The medical bay in the basement of Blackwood Manor was less a hospital and more a laboratory. Machines that hummed with arcane energy sat alongside standard EKG monitors. Nikolai lay face down on a stainless steel table, his back a map of angry red sutures where Silas had stitched him back together after Penny had purged the poison. Zoe stood on the other side of the glass partition, her arms wrapped around herself. She had showered, scrubbing the blood from her skin until she was raw, but she could still smell it. The metallic tang of copper and ancient dust. Silas stepped out of the room, peeling off latex gloves. He looked exhausted, his age showing in the deep lines around his mouth. He is stable, Silas said quietly. Zoe let out a breath that was half sob. Will he wake up? Eventually. The poison was potent. It was distilled from the blood of a vampire starved to madness. It acts as a necrotic agent. His body is fighting a war on a cellular level. Silas looked through the glass at his master. He is in the torpor. The healing sleep. It could be days. It could be weeks. I'm not leaving, Zoe said immediately. Silas looked at her. For the first time, there was no reservation in his gaze, only respect. I did not expect you to. You saved him, Miss Vance. You burned the anchor. He saved me, Zoe corrected. He took the hit. He did what he has not done in 100 years, Silas murmured. He chose to live in the present rather than the past. Silas walked over to a secure cabinet and pulled out a thick file folder. He hesitated, then handed it to her. "What is this?" Zoe asked. "While you were sleeping, I investigated the breach," Silas said, his voice hardening. "Nikolai was right. The traitor is on the council. This is the evidence. Encrypted communications, bank transfers to shell companies that funded Julian's resources." Zoe opened the file. The name at the top of the dossier meant nothing to her, but the photo showed a man with cold, reptile eyes and a perfectly tailored suit. "Counselor Vane, why are you giving this to me?" "Because Nikolai is incapacitated," Silas said. "And by the laws of our kind, when a king falls, his territory is open to challenge. Vane knows Nikolai is wounded. He will come. Not with weapons, but with laws. He will try to seize the domain and declare Nikolai unfit to rule." Zoe looked at the sleeping figure behind the glass. The man who had stood between her and a monster. The man who had been terrified to touch her because he cared too much. "Let him come," Zoe said, closing the file with a snap. "Nikolai taught me that if you can't beat them with strength, you beat them with surprise. I'm going to be the surprise." 3 days passed. The manor was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors in the basement. Zoe spent her days in the library reading. She didn't read novels, she read the Codex Sanguinis, the ancient book of laws Silas had provided. She learned about the hierarchy, the rites of challenge, the sanctuary protocols, and the intricate, lethal dance of vampire politics. She sat by Nikolai's side every night. She talked to him. She told him about her life, not the tragedy of the Stalker, but the real things. How she loved the smell of old bookstores. How she took her coffee black because she was too impatient for sugar to dissolve. How she was terrified of him at first, but now, the thought of a world without him in it felt like a sky without stars. "You said I was a storm," she whispered on the third night, tracing the line of his hand on the sheet, still careful not to wake him. "Well, you're the anchor. So you have to wake up. Storms need anchors, or they just destroy everything." She thought she saw his finger twitch, but it was just a spasm. On the 4th morning, the wards at the gate triggered. Zoe was in the kitchen, forcing herself to eat toast, when the alarm blared a low, mournful horn sound. Silas appeared in the doorway a second later. "They are here," he said. "Counselor Vane. And an escort of enforcers." "How many?" 6 guards. Heavily armed. "And Vane. Is Penny here?" "She is in the vents," Silas said with a faint smile. "She says she has a clear shot with a tranq dart if things go pear-shaped. Tell her to hold fire unless I give the signal," Zoe said. She smoothed down the front of her dress, a severe, high-necked black garment she had found in the wardrobe. It made her look older, sharper. She wasn't the victim in the hoodie anymore. "Are you ready?" Silas asked. Zoe picked up the dossier. "No, but he doesn't know that." The confrontation took place in the main foyer. Counselor Vane was exactly as he appeared in the photo, impeccable, cold, and radiating an aura of smug superiority. His guards, hulking figures in tactical gear, lined the walls. Vane didn't even look at Zoe when she descended the stairs. He looked at Silas. "I am here to accept the surrender of the Dominion," Vane announced, his voice like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "We have received reports that Nikolai Draven has fallen. By the laws of the Council, a territory cannot be left unguarded. I am assuming emergency command." "Mr. Draven is indisposed," Silas said calmly. "He is not dead." "Indisposed is a polite word for comatose," Vane sneered. He took a step forward. "Stand aside, servant. I wish to inspect the body. If he cannot rise to greet a council member, he is unfit to rule." "He's sleeping," Zoe said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly across the stone floor. Vane stopped. He turned slowly, his eyes raking over her with disdain. "And who is this? The pet? The little human doppelganger that started this entire mess?" Zoe walked down the remaining stairs. She didn't rush. She moved with the deliberate, predatory grace Nikolai had drilled into her during their training. She stopped 5 feet from Vane. "I am Zoe Vance," she said. "And under Article 7, Section 4 of the Codex, I am the designated proxy of this domain in the king's absence. Vane blinked. A ripple of unease went through the guards. Article 7. That is an archaic law. It requires a blood bond. Does it? Zoe bluffed. She threw the dossier onto the table between them. Because according to this, you've been busy ignoring laws for a long time. Funding a rogue vampire? Providing security codes to a banned stalker? Conspiring to murder a seated king? Vane's face twitched. That is absurd. Slander. Is it? Zoe opened the file, pointing to a highlighted bank transfer. This account is linked to your shell corporation in the Caymans. The money went to Julian's safe house. We have the logs, Vane. We have the dates. Silas has already sent copies to the High Council in London. They're reviewing them right now. It was a lie. They hadn't sent them yet. But Vane didn't know that. The color drained from Vane's face. You insolent little. He lunged. It was a mistake. He forgot that while Zoe was human, she was standing in a house built by a paranoid warlord. Protocol defense. Zoe shouted. Silas pressed a button on a remote in his pocket. Heavy iron bars slammed down from the ceiling, separating Vane from his guards. At the same moment, a red laser dot appeared on Vane's forehead, Penny, from the vents. Vane froze. You are in violation of the Sanctuary Act, Zoe said, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her voice steady. You attacked a proxy and a parley. That is grounds for immediate execution. You wouldn't dare, Vane hissed. You are human. You cannot kill a counselor. She cannot, a voice rumbled from the shadows at the top of the stairs. But I can. Every head turned. Nikolai stood on the landing. He was leaning heavily against the banister, wearing only loose linen pants, his chest and bandaged torso bare. He looked like death warmed over, pale, gaunt, shaking with effort. But his eyes were open, and they were burning with a terrifying, cold amber fire. Nikolai, Vane whispered, stepping back. Nikolai descended the stairs. It was agonizing to watch. Every step clearly cost him pieces of his soul, but he didn't stop. He walked past Zoe, placing himself between her and the threat, just as he had in the chapel. You conspired against my house, Nikolai said, his voice a low growl. You used my own son as a weapon against me. And now you threaten my guest. He reached through the bars. Vane tried to scramble back, but Nikolai was faster. Even wounded, his speed was blinding. He grabbed Vane by the lapels of his expensive suit and slammed him against the iron bars. The London Council has been notified, Nikolai lied, backing up Zoe's play seamlessly. They have stripped you of your rank effective immediately. You are trespassing. Nikolai leaned in, his fangs descending. Get out of my city. If I see you again, I will not bother with politics. I will tear your head off and mount it on the gates of Crimson. He shoved Vane back. Go. The bars retracted with a hiss. Vane stumbled back, adjusting his suit, trying to regain some shred of dignity. He looked at Nikolai, then at Zoe. He saw the united front. He saw the laser dots still on his forehead. This isn't over, Vane spat. It is for you, Zoe said. Vane signaled his guards. They retreated, the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Nikolai stood rigid for a moment longer, ensuring they were truly gone. Then, the adrenaline failed him. His knees buckled. Zoe was there instantly, catching him. He was heavy, dead weight, but she held him up. I've got you, she grunted, lowering him to the bottom step. I've got you. Nikolai looked up at her. His skin was clammy, but the gray pallor of the poison was gone. You invoked Article 7, he wheezed, a faint smile ghosting his lips. There is no Article 7. I made it up, Zoe confessed, brushing the hair back from his sweaty forehead. I figured he wouldn't admit he didn't know the book. Nikolai laughed, a rasping, painful sound. Brilliant. Ilara, she would have debated him. You outplayed him. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the wood. Thank you. Don't thank me, Zoe whispered. Just heal. The city was a grid of light below them, a sprawling electric nervous system. The air was crisp, signaling the coming autumn. Zoe stood at the edge of the parapet, the wind whipping her hair. She wasn't wearing a hoodie. She was wearing a silk dress, dark red, that fit her perfectly. The door to the roof opened. Nikolai stepped out. He moved with his old grace now, the limp gone, the power returned. He held 2 crystal glasses. He joined her at the railing, handing her a glass. To survival. To survival, Zoe clinked her glass against his. It was sparkling water for her, vintage blood wine for him. They stood in silence for a long time, watching the traffic. Vane is in hiding, Nikolai said. The council formally exiled him yesterday. Silas provided the real financial records. It seems your bluff became reality. I'm a good graphic designer, Zoe shrugged. Forging documents is just art with high stakes. Nikolai turned to look at her. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked younger now that the burden of Julian was gone. The ancient grief that had shrouded him seemed to have lifted, replaced by a quiet curiosity. You are leaving tomorrow, he stated. It wasn't a question. My apartment is clean, Zoe said. The police closed the file. They think Julian was a drifter who skipped town. It's safe to go back. Is it? Nikolai asked. Is it safe? Yes. Is it what I want? Zoe paused. She looked at him, really looked at him. I don't know. Nikolai set his glass down on the stone ledge. He turned his body toward her, giving her his full attention. When I was in the torpor, I dreamed. About Alara? No, Nikolai said. For the first time in 150 years, I did not dream of 1872. I dreamed of a woman who threw sawdust in my face, who stood before a council lord and lied without blinking, who pulled me from the fire. He reached out. This time, he didn't stop. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her jawline. His skin was cool, but it warmed at her touch. I told you I couldn't look at you because I saw her, Nikolai whispered. But that is no longer true. When I look at you now, Zoe, I just see you. And you are terrifyingly distinct. Zoe leaned into his touch. Her heart was hammering, but not from fear. Terrifying is good. Terrifying keeps you on your toes. Stay, Nikolai said. The word was simple, stripped of all command and regality. It was a plea. Not as a prisoner. Not as a protectee. Stay as a partner. Help me run this. Help me ensure that no one like Julian ever slips through the cracks again. Zoe looked at the city below, her old life, her safe, small life. Then she looked at the immortal standing before her, offering her a hand into the darkness. She realized she didn't want the safety anymore. She wanted the storm. I have conditions, she said. Nikolai arched an eyebrow, a spark of amusement returning to his eyes. Of course you do. Name them. 1. I get a salary. A real one. I'm not working for free. Done. Triple your current rate. 2. No more secrets. If we're partners, I need to know everything. The council, the threats, the history. Agreed. The archives are yours. And 3. Zoe stepped closer, closing the gap between them. She reached up and took the lapels of his jacket, pulling him down slightly. You stop treating me like I'm made of glass. I'm not her. I don't break. Nikolai's eyes darkened, the pupils blowing wide. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The strength in him was palpable, a restrained avalanche. No, he murmured against her lips. You don't break. You burn. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and consuming, 100 years of loneliness colliding with the spark of new life. It tasted of wine and winter and promise. When they broke apart, breathless, Nikolai rested his forehead against hers. The city lights formed a halo around them. So, he whispered, what is our first move, partner? Zoe smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile that belonged to the queen of the East Coast. We redecorate, she said. The office is too gloomy. Nikolai laughed, and the sound rang out over the city, clear and free.